Let's begin at the start. For those who only know your name, but not the man, how would you describe yourself and the life you chose to lead in Athens?
Well, if I were to describe myself, I suppose I would speak as I did to the Athenian jury. I'm a man who speaks plainly. I refused, all the sophisticated rhetoric and the polished speeches that people use to flatter the public.
Used your own style.
My own, yes. A style of constant, insistent questioning. My life's work was devoted to philosophy, but not as a teacher with lessons to sell. I was an investigator. And my only real wisdom, if you want to call it that, comes from knowing one simple thing, that I know nothing.
And that awareness, it was the foundation of everything.
Yes. My daily activity, as Xenophon noted, was really about self-control, about providing down-to-earth advice on how to conduct oneself properly.
But so counterintuitive. I mean, accepting ignorance. Most people think wisdom is about having all the answers. Why did you choose to constantly question people, to challenge them, instead of just teaching them truths, like the sophists did for a fee?
Because I wasn't here to provide answers for people to just memorize and repeat. The pursuit of philosophy, which to me was the noblest and best kind of music.
Music.
Yes, in that it harmonizes the soul. It was about instruction. It was a call to action, an exhortation. I questioned people to encourage their own search for truth. If I thought I had all the answers, a body of knowledge to pass on, maybe I would have been a teacher, but that wasn't my purpose.
You saw your role differently.
My divine sign, it directed me to expose pretense and ignorance. So my role was to be a gadfly, stinging the great sluggish horse of the state out of its lazy certainties.
And that sting, well, it earned you a death sentence. Let's shift to your final hours. You were condemned for corrupting the youth and introducing new gods, but your execution was delayed for quite a while.
It was.
The sacred ship had been sent to Delos, making it a holy season where public executions were forbidden. You had to wait, known death was coming, but not exactly when. That must have created a very reflective atmosphere.
It did.
It's reported that on that final morning after your chains were taken off, you reflected on pleasure and pain, how to seem to grow from one stem. What deeper meaning did you find in that?
Yes. The simple act of rubbing my leg where the chains had been, it was a pure moment of understanding. That relationship between pleasure and pain, it reveals the true state of the body. They're opposites, of course, but you can't have one without the other in this life.
They're inseparable.
Completely. A man can't feel great pleasure without also setting himself up for its opposite. They are two sides of a coin, and while you have the coin to the body, you have to accept both. Death, however, death is the only real release from that.
What is death then, Ingeridio?
It's nothing more and nothing less than the complete separation of the soul from the body. A moment where the soul can finally exist entirely in herself, parted from the physical world and free from that cycle.
Which leads to that really radical claim you made, that the true philosopher is always pursuing death and dying. To us today, and I'm sure to your friends then, that sounds incredibly grim. What does that preparation for death actually mean, and how does the body get in the way?
That doesn't grow at all. It's liberation. The body, you see, it's not our partner in this. It is a massive evil. It's the source of constant trouble and distraction. Just think of its endless needs, the need for food, the vulnerability to disease. These things take up all our time.
But wait, if I can interrupt, surely the body isn't all bad. I mean, don't you need your senses to observe the world and question people? Aren't basic necessities just practical?
Practical necessity, yes, but it quickly becomes an obsession. And think about the larger consequences. Even wars and factions, where do they come from?
Why?
They arise from the lusts of the body.
Yeah.
The need for money, for land, for power. These things are only wanted in the service of the body. So if the body is making these endless demands, how can the soul, which is seeking truth, ever be truly free?
So the senses themselves are part of the problem.
The soul finds truth best only when the mind is gathered into herself, free from the noise of the body. Sight and hearing, even at their very best, are inaccurate witnesses. Philosophy, then, is purification, if the lifelong practice of releasing the soul from the body's chains.
So if the senses are unreliable, what did most people back then, and then even now, get fundamentally wrong about knowledge itself?
They mistook the visible for the real. They focused on things that change. Individual horses, specific clothes, particular stones, these things are always in flux. They're born, they decay. But true knowledge isn't about those things.
It's about something else entirely.
It's about the unchanging, the unseen ideas or forms, absolute justice, absolute beauty, absolute good. These are the essences.
So these forms, these perfect abstract ideas, can you give us an analogy? How is a visible thing different from its pure form?
Of course. Think of a perfect circle. A geometer's ideal circle. Yeah, you can try to draw one, but even with the best compass and the steadiest hand, the line you draw will be slightly imperfect. It will have flaws.
Right.
Yet when we look at that imperfect drawing, we know it's trying to be the ideal of a perfect circle. Yeah, an invisible, flawless ideal that exists only in the mind. That is the form. It's the essence that you can only perceive with the mind alone.
Okay, that makes it much clearer. But if true knowledge is of these unseen forms, how do we, stuck in these physical bodies, ever acquire it? If we can't let it to our senses, where does it come from?
This is where we have to talk about recollection. When we see two material things that are, say, equal to stones that look the same size, we also recognize that they fall short of the abstract idea of absolute equality.
They're not perfectly equal.
No. Yeah, and our ability to judge them as imperfectly equal means we must have had the standard of perfection, the ideal of equality in our minds before we ever saw the stones. This implies that our soul must have existed before, without a body, and already possessed intelligence of these forms.
So learning is just remembering.
Learning is the process of recovering knowledge that we forgot the moment our soul was trapped in the body at birth.
Okay, so that's this huge idea. And if knowledge is just recollection, why is questioning your Socratic method more important than just telling someone the answer?
Because if you put a question to a person in the right way, you act as a kind of midwife for the truth. You don't put new knowledge in, you help them bring forth what's already there. Through that process of self-examination, he will give a true answer from himself. And that proves the knowledge was already within him, just waiting to be recollected.
Let's turn to ethics then. How does this focus on eternal forms change how we think about moral behavior? You once said that common virtues like courage are just a shadow of virtue. What did you mean by that?
What I meant is that true virtue can only be acquired when it's exchanged for the one true coin, and that coin is wisdom.
Not for other things, like avoiding pain.
Exactly. Think of a soldier who seems courageous in battle. If he's only standing his ground because he's more afraid of the shame of running away or the punishment he'd receive, he's just exchanging one fear for another, a lesser pain for a greater pain.
So that's the shadow.
That is a shadow of virtue. It lacks freedom. It lacks health of the soul. True virtue is when the soul acts out of a pure understanding of the good itself, not out of some calculation of pleasure or pain. It is a purging away of the body's influence.
Speaking of your final moments, you insisted that we are possessions of the gods. If life is such a prison, as you said, why isn't a person allowed to be his own benefactor and just choose to end his own suffering?
Because we are prisoners who should not open the door and run away. We have to wait until God summons us. Think of it this way. If your own possession, an ox or an ass, put itself out of the way without your permission, you'd be angry with it, wouldn't you?
I suppose so.
The gods are our guardians, and we are their possessions. It is simply not our place to decide when our service to them is over.
That explains your composure. So after this lifelong preparation, this attempt to purify the soul, what actually decides its fate? Does it just disappear like snow because your friend's worried?
No. The soul is eternal, indissoluble. It's in the very likeness of the divine. The body is the part that changes and decays. The soul's fate depends entirely on the life it led, on its purification.
So there are different paths.
The pure soul, the soul of the true philosopher, who is abstained from the lusts of the flesh. That soul departs to the invisible, immortal world to dwell with the gods. It's finally released from error and folly.
The impure soul?
The impure soul, the one that was obsessed with gluttony or power or lust. It's weighed down by its corporeal taint. It's afraid of the invisible world, so it lingers here near the visible one, maybe prowling around tombs and monuments.
That's a fascinating image, the soul literally carrying the weight of its earthly life. What happens to it then?
These heavy souls are compelled to be imprisoned in another body, one that's suitable to their former nature.
For example,
while those who are gluttons might pass into the bodies of asses or similar creatures. Those who are unjust tyrants might return as wolves or hawks to live out their predatory nature.
So the soul chooses its next form based on its moral habits? That's a very direct form of moral accounting. Did your friends find that comforting?
It was meant to show the absolute necessity of self-reflection. Even the good citizens, those who are just and temperate without truth philosophy, they might pass into gentle creatures like bees or ants, or returned as orderly men. But true freedom is only for the purified soul who followed wisdom.
You spent your life challenging false certainty. In our modern world, we have tools, algorithms that seem to think for us. We're outsourcing the very effort you demanded. What should humans be most careful about in this new reality?
The greatest evil isn't the tool, it's the condition of the soul using it. You must be most careful when pleasure or pain is intense, because in those moments the soul is tricked into believing that what the body affirms is true.
How so?
Every intense pleasure and every intense pain acts like a nail. It rivets the soul to the body, making her believe that the tangible world is the only reality. When you outsource the hard work of wisdom for the pleasure of convenience, you are just driving that nail deeper.
So what's the alternative?
The true lover of knowledge must trust only to herself, to her own soul's intuition of absolute existence. She must mistrust that which comes through others, or which is subject to change.
That's a profound challenge for today. It's a focus on internal clarity, a kind of mental hygiene. If you could ask people today one final question to guide them, what would it be?
I would ask this: are you more concerned with acquiring things for your mortal body, which is destined to decay, or with the true purification of your immortal soul, which seeks the divine and unchanging truth?
Socrates' wisdom begins with accepting ignorance. His whole life was about searching for those unseen, unchanging forms.
And this practice, this constant effort to pull the mind away from the body's noise, is what defined philosophy for me. The lifelong practice of preparing the soul for death, for true existence.
You know, that fear that the soul might just scatter, the one your friend Phaedo called the child within us. Socrates didn't dismiss it. He said we needed to find a charmer of our fears. His final instruction to his friends was to search all in Greece and beyond for such a charmer. But most importantly, he added, don't forget to seek for him among yourself. So the question we leave you with is this: what internal fear born of the body will you seek to charm away today?